ready for takeoff.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming out here today. I'm so excited for this opportunity to share all my thoughts with you. My name is Tori Machen, and I traveled here from Des Moines, Iowa. A little bit about me: I love bunnies, I have 2 rabbits at home, I love playing cozy games on my Switch, and my favorite hobby is designing amigurumi. If you're interested in connecting with me after this presentation, you can find me on LinkedIn at Victoria Machen to connect with me professionally. I also have a Twitter account that I don't go on too often, but I'll try to get back to you if you reach out to me there. And I share a lot about my crochet hobby on my YouTube and Instagram at Tori Creations. And I love making new friends, so if you see me in the hallways roaming around RubyConf, feel free to stop me and say hi. So today we're going to talk about the similarities between crocheting amigurumi and software development, and how it can be important to make connections between your hobbies and your career in tech. So as an overview, we'll start by defining crochet, amigurumi, and software development just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Then I'll discuss some of the similarities that I've noticed between crocheting and software development. I'll follow that up by sharing how my hobby of crochet has helped influence my career. And finally, I'll share some resources for learning crochet if you're interested in picking up a new creative hobby. My hope is that after this talk, it'll inspire you to make connections between your hobbies and your career in tech as well. So what is crochet? Crocheting is a fiber crafting technique that uses a crochet hook to create a series of loops with yarn, thread, or other material in order to create a fabric. It's a very versatile craft and can be used to create a variety of different items like hats, blankets, and cardigans, and the list goes on and on. And to get a little bit more specific, the style of crocheting that I love to do is called amigurumi. Amigurumi originated in Japan, and it's the art of crocheting or knitting small creatures. Typically, when you make amigurumi, you crochet in the round or a continuous spiral shape, making various crochet stitches with yarn in order to form 3-dimensional pieces that you later stuff with fiber-fill stuffing, and you sew together to form a stuffed animal, a doll, or whatever else your imagination can come up with. If we look at the photo in the bottom left, we can see the signature spiral technique that amigurumi uses. And if we take a look at the photos on the right, we can see some various 3D pieces that I've crocheted in order to create a stuffed animal panda. So when I talk about crocheting in the context of this talk, I'm referring to the amigurumi style of crochet because that's what I'm most familiar with. But a lot of the principles that I mentioned in this talk can also apply to other styles of crochet as well. So a little bit of background on my hobby. I've been crocheting on and off since I was about 15 years old, and I started designing my own crochet patterns in 2015. And all the pictures you've seen in the past couple of slides and the rest of the presentation are examples of different amigurumi that I've crocheted. Specifically, this frog picture that you see in the bottom right is my very first amigurumi that I've ever made. It was supposed to be really small, cute, and round, but somehow it ended up oval-shaped. So now that we've defined crocheting and amigurumi, I wanted to take a moment to define software development just so that everyone's on the same page. Software development is a process that programmers use to build computer programs and applications. It involves a range of activities including creating, designing, programming, testing, deploying, and maintaining software. So I started experimenting with code in 2016. Shortly after that, I attended an online boot camp where I was first introduced to Ruby. I started my first software development job in 2018, and now I am currently a software engineer at a startup called Free Will, where we're on a mission to raise $1 trillion for high-impact nonprofits. So I started my crochet hobby a handful of years before I started learning about software development. And as I was learning how to develop software and I got deeper into my career, I kept noticing the similarities between my crochet hobby and my software development career. And you might be sitting in your chair right now thinking to yourself, but Tori, I'm a software developer, I write code every single day, and never have I felt like I was creating one of your crocheted stuffed animals. So what could these two activities possibly have in common? The first similarity that I want to talk about is design. Before I start working on a new software application or building out a new feature for an existing app, time is spent deciding how the final project should look and feel like to the user. Oftentimes, this means creating mock-ups or storyboards that developers use as guidelines to what an application or feature should look like in the end. A similar thing happens when I'm designing amigurumi. When I'm starting on a new project, I spend time up front drawing out a sketch of what I'd like my end result to look like. I consider things like, what types of animals does my audience want to see next? What are the different pieces that I'm going to need to crochet to create this new stuffed animal? And what are the proportions that I'll need for each of these pieces? Thinking about visual design is very important in software development and amigurumi design. In both of these cases, if we don't take initial time up front to mock up our end product, we could find ourselves building something that is either not what our user wanted or not what we originally pictured that we were going to make. Another connection that I've made between my crochet hobby and software development was that crochet patterns are surprisingly like computer programs. This was one of the first similarities that I noticed when I started learning about computer programming. So this is a snippet of text from a crochet pattern to make a chick. A crochet pattern is a series of instructions, typically read from top to bottom, that tell the crocheter what steps to follow to create the end result, in amigurumi's case, of a stuffed creature. On the flip side, computer programs are a sequence of instructions or operations, usually also read from top to bottom, that tell a computer what actions to perform, generally with some sort of outcome. So both crochet patterns and programs are instructions to output something, whether it be the cute body of a chick stuffed animal or a friendly message of hello world to the user. They also both have syntax. When we're developing software, we use programming languages to write our programs in, like Ruby. These programming languages have their own syntax or set of rules that determine what words and symbols mean and how we can use those words and symbols to tell the computer that's executing our code what to do. Some examples of syntax that we see in Ruby are def and end to define the start and end of a method. So here I have a snippet of a crochet pattern on the right. When you take a closer look at this pattern, would you be able to understand what it means? If you're not familiar with crocheting, this might almost look like a foreign language to you. That's because crochet patterns also have their own special syntax or shared language across the crocheted community. They're written with various abbreviations and terms that together form instructions on what the crocheter needs to do. So I've listed some of the abbreviations of this pattern on the left side. So for example, SC means single crochet in crochet terms, and it defines a specific stitch that the crocheter needs to create using their yarn and hook. And if we dive deeper into the syntax of both crocheting and coding, we can find even more similarities. For example, they both have loops. When I'm writing a program, I use a loop when I want a series of instructions to be repeated until a certain condition is met. In this example, I just have a very simple loop that will print out hello a total of 5 times. Crochet patterns also make use of loops. Let's take a look at our crochet pattern example again and focus on one of our rows, row 3. In row 3 of our pattern, it's telling us that we're going to alternate between single crocheting and increasing a total of 6 times. A single crochet and an increase are both 2 types of stitches that we can make when we're crocheting. So instead of writing out all of the steps like we see in the top right of our slide, we can use square brackets and an X to denote that there are some repeatable instructions. Anything inside the brackets is what we need to repeat, and the number to the right of our X is how many times we need to repeat those instructions. So you can see that we can rewrite and simplify row 3 on the top side of our slide to make use of our loop syntax. So we can take what we've learned so far and translate a snippet of a crochet pattern into some simple code. If we take a look at the highlighted line in this pattern, it's telling us that on row 5, we're going to increase for the first 5 stitches, and then we'll single crochet for the next 2 stitches. And once we've completed that row, you can see in parentheses, we should have a total of 12 stitches. On the right side, I started writing a method to create a tail for my amigurumi project. As an example, for row 5, we need to create a total of 12 stitches for this row. 7 stitches for this row. We'll iterate through the range of 1 to our total stitch count and call an increase method or a single crochet method based on the result of our conditional, which in this case is whatever stitch we're on. So really, a pattern is just a program. Another similarity is testing. As a software developer, testing is a huge step in creating reliable software. Software developers write and run tests to ensure that a section of their application that they're building is behaving as intended. Here's a snippet of code, a calculator, with a method to sum 2 numbers together. We can see that when the method is called, with those 2 numbers, those numbers are added together, and here I'm just explicitly returning the resulting summed value. A developer can write a unit test to verify that the sum method is adding the given numbers correctly. So here on the right, I have a simple test that creates our calculator and calls the sum method with numbers 1 and 2, and asserts that the result is 3. So just like when I'm developing software, when I'm writing and following crochet patterns, I can utilize similar testing strategies to make sure that I'm crocheting the correct thing. One of the worst things that happens when I'm crocheting is when I miss a stitch somewhere in my project and my total stitch count for my row is off. I have to stop what I'm doing and try and find and fix my mistake. Luckily, each row in my pattern lists the expected number of stitches that I should have once that row is completed. If I complete a row and compare my actual stitch count to the expected stitch count as seen on my pattern and they don't match, I know that I failed my expectations. This is just like failing an expectation of a unit test. So even though I don't have a computer when I'm crocheting, I can apply testing strategies to my work. Whenever I'm designing patterns, I always make sure that I add the expected stitch count to the end of each row as if I were writing a unit test. In addition to tests that software developers create while they're writing code to verify that that code is working as expected, software development can also include an aspect of user acceptance testing. When we think about user acceptance testing in software development world, we usually think of a software developer handing off some completed code to someone else who then runs some tests on the software to verify that there are no mistakes, no bugs, and that the software is working as expected. The crochet community has something similar. When a pattern designer has finished writing a new pattern, they often hire a pattern tester to follow the pattern instructions before the pattern is released and published to the public. These pattern testers make sure that the pattern is written in a way that's understandable, and they verify that there are no mistakes in the pattern and confirm that the crocheted piece that they ended up with is what they expected to end up with. Another similarity is refactoring. In software development, once we've written functioning code, we usually take time to refactor our code. Refactoring is restructuring your code without changing our code's behavior. Oftentimes, we refactor code to remove duplication, to make our code easier to understand and more reusable, and ultimately to make our code clean. When a crochet pattern designer is writing a pattern, they also take steps to refactor their pattern. So here's a picture on the left of the first draft of my amigurumi pattern for a Pikmin. You can see that this first draft honestly looks super messy. It's riddled with changes, lines are crossed off, there's duplication everywhere, and there are loads of comments. But once I finish writing the pattern and I'm happy with how my end result looks like, I take time to go back and type out my pattern nicely. This includes refactoring my pattern to remove duplication by using that crochet loop syntax that we talked about earlier. But one of the most wholesome similarities between crocheting and coding is that they both have welcoming and supportive communities. When I was first learning how to code, my coding bootcamp recommended that I join various platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn to engage with people in tech. It was awesome to find communities of people who are learning how to code just like me. Similarly, I found that Instagram is a great place for aspiring crochet artists to make friends and find support. There are so many crochet artists posting pictures and videos of their projects that they're working on, hosting virtual crochet events online, and supporting each other in the comments sections. And I've made some amazing friends from all over the world on that platform who help support each other in their amigurumi design journeys. Meetups and conferences. Right now, we're all learning, sharing, and networking with each other here at RubyConf, a tech conference surrounding topics related to the Ruby programming language. In the crochet community, believe it or not, there are also conferences and summits that people attend to learn about crocheting and other related topics like how to start your own crochet business. I've been to a virtual crochet summit before, and it was awesome how opening and welcoming the people were at the conference. And it really reminded me a lot of RubyConf. One of my favorite similarities, though, is how generous both communities are with providing free online learning resources. When I was first learning how to crochet amigurumi, I used online blogs and YouTube tutorials to help teach me the perfect crochet techniques and how to make specific amigurumi stuffed animals. It was great because it made the barrier of entry for learning how to crochet lower, and it gave me a great starting point as a beginner. The same goes for the software development community. After I first got interested in learning about software development, I went online to find free resources like Free Code Camp and the Odin Project, where I could learn the basics of programming and decide if it was something that I wanted to shift my career to. There are even tons of developers out there sharing their knowledge and experiences on personal tech blogs. So by now, you might be asking, Tori, we can see that there are some similarities between software development and crocheting amigurumi, but why should we care? I've learned that making connections between my hobby and my career in tech has helped me become a better software developer. For one, designing amigurumi has made me better at recognizing patterns. A lot of the amigurumi designs that I create follow similar structural patterns for making different shapes, such as cones, cubes, and cylinders. I just have to modify these different structures to fit the specifications of my design. And I've gotten really good at identifying when and where I should use those various structural patterns. Software development also involves a lot of different patterns, like design patterns. Since crocheting has helped improve my pattern recognition skills already, it's been easier for me to recognize when and where to use software design patterns and how to tweak them in order to fit my use case. This has helped me become a more efficient developer. Crocheting has also helped improve my creative thinking. When I'm designing a new amigurumi character, I literally have to start from a blank page. I have to exercise the creative side of my brain to come up with new ideas and designs that I think people will love. After I've decided what my amigurumi design will look like, I have to be creative with how I write the pattern to make the various shapes and sizes that my design is calling for. In software development, a lot of times we think devs have to be rigid, mathematical, logical, and just follow the instructions that they're given. However, great software developers have to be able to come up with new and innovative solutions to problems. They need a sense of creativity to discover solutions that no one has made before. By exercising my brain in a creative way using my crochet hobby, I'm able to use that creative mindset to think of new ideas, new improvements to projects that I'm working on, and various solutions to problems when I'm developing software, because I've already trained my brain to think outside of the box. Crocheting has also helped me become a better teacher and mentor. Not only do I love designing crochet patterns, but I also love helping others learn how to crochet amigurumi. I've done this through creating various crochet tutorials, and I've also done some mentoring. Both of these processes have helped me learn how to better explain technical concepts to others. If you think explaining software concepts is difficult, try explaining to someone how to wrap and loop a piece of yarn around a small hook a very specific way in order to create a crochet stitch. And try doing this virtually. It is very difficult. And because of this, I've learned that sometimes I need multiple modes of communication to explain different concepts to others. Whether that be a written explanation, a step-by-step picture tutorial, or a short recorded video explanation. I've carried this learning over to my software development career too. When I'm trying to explain complex technical problems to my peers, I try to find a variety of resources, a text blog, additional documentation, or a video tutorial in addition to my verbal explanations in order to help solidify the new concepts. So I challenge you to take a look at your hobbies and activities that you participate in outside of programming. And you might find that there are some similar connections between your work and your hobbies, and maybe your hobby can help make you a better developer. So if you're interested in picking up a new creative hobby like crocheting, it's fairly easy to get started. You just need yarn, a crochet hook, and scissors to learn the very basics of crochet. And if you want to learn amigurumi, you'll just need a few extra materials like fiberfill stuffing and a yarn needle. And you can find all these materials at your local craft store for under $30, depending on how yarn crazy you get. And as I touched on before, there are also a number of free online tutorials and blogs that you can visit to learn how to crochet and make amigurumi. And I highly recommend visiting the Lovecrafts blog. They have some really great information on crochet basics. They have great videos and text explanations on that, and also how to make amigurumi. And I also make some video tutorials aimed at beginners who are interested in amigurumi, so feel free to check that out. So thank you, everyone, for coming to my talk. Does anyone have any questions? Yep, in the back. Oh, that's a great question. So the question was, do I ever create crochet patterns with other people, kind of like in a collaborative effort, and do I find similarities between that and coding with other people? I would say that I actually haven't developed a pattern with other people. Usually I've worked on my own, but I do know that there are some people who create patterns together, but I personally don't have experience with that. So. Yeah, so it definitely depends on how big the amigurumi is. Like when you get used to making a pattern, if you're making it over and over, like repetitively, it can go by pretty quickly. Like I've made like these frogs. It can probably take me between maybe like 3 hours. It sounds like a lot of time, but when you're designing, it takes a lot longer. It can take, usually I split it up and I can design a pattern like over the process of a week. But probably it would take around maybe like 12 to 15 hours because you do make a lot of mistakes and you do want to like make sure that it's right, and sometimes that process involves like creating it twice just to make sure that they both look the same and your pattern's working. So thank you. Did you have a question? Okay, so he asked about how do I go about creating my patterns? Is it a more exploratory way, or am I going back and forth constantly of crocheting a little bit and writing things down? I think it depends. If I'm making something like a circle like this, I can pretty much, in my head, I already know kind of like the general pattern that I need. So I'll like write it down, and then I'll start crocheting and making sure that it looks like what I expect. But if I'm creating something that's in a really strange shape, kind of like the Pikmin, which is like going, curving a lot, that's something that I will write what I think it will be, and then I'll crochet it, and then I'm like, that's not what I wanted, so then I'll erase that, and then I'll try something else. So it depends how familiar I am with how often I am going back and forth with writing versus testing it out. So. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you all for coming to my talk.